The initial tension in the exclusive restaurant on Orchard Road was palpable. Mrs. Tan, a prominent socialite whose husband, Mr. Tan, was a renowned business magnate, barely concealed her disdain for Sarah Lim, her son David's fiancée. Selling laksa at a hawker center, she had scoffed earlier, dismissing Sarah's mother's honest trade. On the day of the formal family dinner to discuss the upcoming wedding, Mrs. Tan finally erupted, grabbing Sarah by her hair and unleashing a torrent of abuse, transforming what should have been a blessed occasion into a chaotic spectacle of violence, greed, and hypocrisy. This ugly scene was merely the prelude to a bitter saga of retribution. The private dining room at the Michelin-starred restaurant in Marina Bay Sands instantly froze. The forced smiles and polite probing that had been exchanged moments before vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp animosity. Sarah Lim trembled not just from the pain of Mrs. Tan's hand gripping her hair, but from the profound humiliation. She had never imagined that on what should have been one of the happiest days of her life, she would suffer such an insult at the hands of her beloved's mother. Where did this low-class hawker trash come from? Trying to ruin our family, Mrs. Tan's shriek ripped through the air, completely shedding her sophisticated socialite persona for the abrasive clamor of a fishwife from the wet market. Her eyes blazed with hatred, and her carefully preserved face was grotesquely contorted by fury. David Tan, Sarah's fiancé, stammered, "Mother, please stop attempting to intervene," but Mrs. Tan ignored him, yanking Sarah's hair harder. It was then that a voice clear and resounding cut through the din. "Take your filthy hands off my daughter's head, MDM. Ong." Sarah's mother rushed forward. All her life, MDM. Ong had been a quiet woman, never raising her voice, silently preparing laksa at her hawker stall. But now, like a protective lioness revealing her fangs for the first time, she seized Mrs. Tan's arm. The strength in MDM, Ong's hands accustomed to lifting heavy pots and stirring hot wuks over blazing fires, was far beyond anything Mrs. Tan could have imagined. "Let go of me, you uncultured brute, Mrs." Tan screamed, struggling to pull away, but Madame Ong's grip was unyielding. In that moment, the strength in Mrs. Tan's hand which held Sarah's hair faltered. "Madam." Ong swiftly pulled the freed Sarah behind her, shielding her with her small but resolute back, much like a hen protecting her chick. "What has my Sarah done wrong, madam? She only loved your son. How dare you grab my daughter's hair? Who do you think you are, madam?" Ong's voice trembled, but it carried an unshakable resolve. "Mrs." Tan glared contemptuously at Bam, Ong's hand gripping her arm. "Look at this. This is the true colors of someone with no breeding. When they can't reason, they resort to violence. Your laksa-selling mother and you who learned from her are exactly the same." A cold sneer touched MDM Ong's lips. "Is earning an honest living uncultured? Then how magnificent are your roots, madam, that you adorn yourself with others' money and lord over people causing such a spectacle." The restaurant manager and staff who had been watching the scene unfold rushed over to separate the two women, but the formal dinner had already devolved into utter chaos. David, flustered and helpless, stood awkwardly between Sarah and his mother, while his father, Mr. Tan, remained slumped deep in his armchair, his face etched with displeasure, clearly annoyed by the whole situation, and making no effort to stop his wife. It was then that a middle-aged woman seated at a corner table quietly put down her smartphone and rose. Clad in a sophisticated tweed jacket, she was Madame Lee, a social acquaintance of Mrs. Tan. She had once been part of the same charity organization as Mrs. Tan, but had distanced herself, disgusted by Mrs. Tan's hypocrisy. Today, by sheer coincidence, she had witnessed the entire spectacle from beginning to end. "Mrs. Tan, you truly are something else." Madame Lee's chilling voice commanded all attention. Mrs. Tan, flustered at having her true colors exposed, forced a smile. "Oh, Madame Lee, what a surprise. It's just a bit of a heated discussion between us. A misunderstanding, you see." "Misunderstanding? From where I stand, it looks far from a misunderstanding," Madame Lee retorted, walking to the table. She gently took MDM Ong's hand. "You're MDM Ong, aren't you? The one who runs the laksa stall at the hawker center and quietly donates to underprivileged children every month, MDM." Ong blinked in surprise, wondering how Madame Lee knew about her anonymous donations. Madame Lee then turned her gaze to Mrs. Tan, her eyes filled with contempt. Mrs. Tan, you said it yourself at our charity meeting recently, didn't you? That you wanted to find an anonymous donor, promote them widely under our foundation's name, and use that publicity to boost your company's image. And that anonymous donor you were so eager to exploit, it turns out was Ms. Mong. Ong here, the low-class hawker you disdained, is the hidden benefactor you plan to use. What a small world, wouldn't you agree? The moment those words were uttered, the atmosphere completely shifted. Mr. Tan's face hardened, and David turned ashen, staring at his mother. Mrs. Tan's face, already pale, now turned a ghastly shade of blue. Her repulsive scheme had been exposed in the most humiliating way imaginable for all to see. Only then did Sarah feel all the pieces click into place. She understood why Mrs. Tan had probed so relentlessly about her mother's donations, why she had wanted to invite her mother to her foundation's event. It wasn't out of respect, but out of a vile desire to exploit her mother's good deeds as a tool for her own business. No, that's not true. What nonsense are you talking about, Mrs. Tan desperately denied it, but in the face of Madame Lee's confident voice and the icy stares of those around them, her excuses crumbled. Everything collapsed. Her mask as an elegant, socialite and benevolent philanthropist shattered into 1,000 pieces. Sarah turned to look at her mother, who stood behind her. Tears welled in Ong's eyes, but they were no longer tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of fury and fierce determination. Sarah tightly gripped her mother's hand. The warm, callous touch gave her courage. No more silence. No, more suffering. Sarah firmly resolved that she would repay every humiliation received today and every sorrow her mother had endured over the years. This was not merely a broken engagement. This was the beginning of a war. Sarah and Ong stormed out of the restaurant and silently hailed a taxi. As the city lights blurred past the window, the traumatic memories of the past hour replayed in Sarah's mind. Mrs. Tan's venomous face, David's helpless expression, and her mother's trembling back as she threw everything aside to protect her daughter. It all felt surreal. As soon as they arrived home, Madame Ong, pretending everything was fine, headed straight for the kitchen. "Sarah, you didn't have dinner, did you? I'll whip something up quickly." Her composure only pierced Sarah's heart more deeply. Her mother had lived her entire life that way, silently enduring, never showing her pain no matter how much she suffered inside. Mum Sarah whispered, "It's okay, MDM." Ong, who was opening the refrigerator door, visibly trembled. She paused for a moment, then turned, forcing a faint smile. "Yes, Mum's fine, right. What's there to dwell on? It just wasn't meant to be with that family. Let's just say we dodged a bullet, my dear." At that moment, Sarah's suppressed tears burst forth. It wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Knowing the immense hurt and anger hidden behind her mother's forced smile, her heart ached. Sarah rushed to Ong and wept in her arms like a child. Ong silently stroked her daughter's back, her rough hands gently caressing Sarah's hair. Mother and daughter held each other for a long time. That night, Sarah lay awake, her mind reeling with a complex swirl of thought. Anger at Mrs. Tan, the hollowness of a shattered wedding, and above all, the profound betrayal by David Tan. What exactly had he been doing? While his mother was committing such a horrific act, he had merely repeated, "Mother, please stop standing by idly." Was that the best a man who claimed to love her could do? As dawn approached, Sarah's smartphone vibrated. The caller ID showed David Tan. Sarah took a deep breath and answered. Through the receiver, David's anxious and exhausted voice reached her. "Sarah, are you okay? I'm so incredibly sorry. 100 apologies aren't enough. I'll kneel and beg on my mother's behalf." His voice was desperate, but Sarah's heart had grown cold. "Sorry for what, David? Are you sorry for what your mother did, or are you sorry you couldn't stop it? Both. Everything is my fault. I should have been stronger. But you know my mother's temper. Once she's set on something, no one can stop her." His excuse about his mother's temper shattered any remaining affection Sarah had for him. Temper grabbing someone's hair, fabricating lies, humiliating them, and trying to exploit their good deeds for your business? That's not just a temper, David. That's a fundamental flaw in character. David, please. Mother knows she was wrong and regrets it. She was just too emotional and made a mistake. Let's talk again. Okay, I'll convince her somehow. I'll formally apologize to your mother too. Sarah let out a bitter laugh. He still didn't understand the situation. Apologize with what money or another lie? Your mother isn't the type to reflect, David. By now, she's probably plotting how to twist this situation and make Mum and me look like the bad guys. Sarah, why are you thinking like that? We have love, don't we? We can't end it like this. Love. Sarah's voice turned icy. What kind of love are you talking about? Standing by idly while my mother is humiliated and I'm assaulted. Prioritizing your family's reputation over my pain. I'm sorry, but I don't need that kind of love anymore. Sarah abruptly ended the call. Her hands trembled. Seeing the true face of the man she had believed she loved was far more painful than she had imagined. He might have been a good person once, but he wasn't strong. In the face of injustice, in the face of the formidable wall that was his mother, he chose to be a cowardly bystander. And sometimes bystanders were just as cruel as the perpetrators. The next morning, MDM. Ong woke up at her usual time, preparing to go to her stall. Despite her swollen eyes, she managed to smile for Sarah. Sarah, why don't you take a day off today and we can go for a walk, Mum and you? Sarah shook her head. No, Mum, I'm going to work. And you should open your stall too. We won't run away. We won't hide. Sarah's expression was resolute. We've done nothing wrong. The ones who should bow their heads are them, not us. At work, Sarah was confronted with another harsh reality she had to face: David, who worked in the same department every day. David approached Sarah's desk, his eyes pleading, trying to speak to her, but Sarah treated him as if he were invisible. Their colleagues, whether they knew about the incident or not, cast subtle, curious glances at the two. Sarah, feigning indifference, steadfastly focused on her work. But Mrs. Tan, as Sarah had expected, had begun to move. During lunch, Sarah's blood ran cold when a colleague showed her a post on a local online community forum. It was an inflammatory article with a provocative headline: High-flying corporate fiancé turns out to be a hawker's daughter. Dramatic bride to be assaults future mother-in-law over dowry dispute. The content cunningly twisted the facts, portraying Sarah as demanding an unreasonable dowry, and then initiating the altercation at the family dinner when her demands were refused. It even slandered MDM. Ong's charity work as hypocrisy, an attempt to whitewash a humble past. It was clearly an attempt to manipulate public opinion. Miss Lim, is this true? Colleagues whispered. Sarah bit her lip. Mrs. Tan's counterattack had begun. This was no longer a simple family dispute, but a dirty mudslinging fight designed to utterly destroy a person's life. Sarah rushed to the washroom, splashing cold water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror looked desolate. But she wouldn't break. If she collapsed now, she would become a laughingstock, and their lies would become the truth. Fine, let's do this. A steely glint entered Sarah's eyes. Any thought of reconciling with David Tan was now gone. This was a battle for her and her mother's honor. And Sarah vowed she would not lose. The cracks had appeared, and it was now time to shatter everything. Mrs. Tan's public relations campaign proved to be more persistent and systematic than Sarah had anticipated. The initial forum post was just the beginning. Similar articles rapidly spread across various parenting groups, alumni networks, and even local community forums. As if orchestrated by an unseen hand, every post painted Sarah and MDM Ong as unscrupulous mother and daughter. These young people these days are scary, trying to marry for money, and when it doesn't work out, they slander the mother-in-law. You don't even need to see how she raised her daughter selling laksa to know. Even her charity work was just for image. Gives me chills. Malicious comments choked Sarah's breathing. The atmosphere at her office turned cold. Sympathetic glances morphed into suspicion, and some colleagues openly began to avoid her. David continued to send Sarah messages filled with hollow excuses like, "This isn't my mother's doing. It's a misunderstanding. I'll fix it." His incompetence and evasiveness only fueled Sarah's rage. That evening after work, Sarah found MDM Ong disconsolately closing her stall. Outside the stall, rubbish bags lay strewn, seemingly discarded on purpose, and the metal shutter was defaced with the word fraud scrawled in red paint. Mum MDM. Ong startled at Sarah's voice, quickly trying to shield the graffiti with her body. "Oh, my daughter's here. Come on, let's go inside. It's cold." Seeing her mother's forced cheerfulness, Sarah's heart sank. Who did this? Who did this, Mum? I don't know. Just some kids playing pranks, maybe. We can clean it tomorrow morning. MDM. Ong reached for Sarah's hand, but Sarah didn't move. She had spotted a faint bruise on her mother's wrist. Something had clearly happened at the stall earlier in the day. "Mum, tell me, what happened today, MDM?" Ong finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. Some aunties came by saying they saw the internet posts. They shouted at me asking how I raised my daughter, saying we were scheming to exploit their family. Someone even spat in the laksa. Sarah felt her blood run cold. This wasn't just an online attack. Mrs. Tan had begun to attack her mother's livelihood, her only source of pride. This was tantamount to murder. That night, watching her sleeping mother Sarah hardened her resolve. She couldn't fight this alone anymore. She needed help. She decided to contact Madam Lee, the only outside witness who had seen everything at the family dinner. Madam Lee was the only one who truly knew Mrs. Tan's true nature. Sarah, clinging to a sliver of hope, called her. "Hello, Madam Lee, it's Sarah Lim. We met at the family dinner." To Sarah's surprise, Madam Lee's voice on the other end was calm. "Miss Lim, I was expecting your call. You've seen the posts circulating online, haven't you? That's Mrs. Tan's handiwork. She's a person who would do anything to protect her reputation. Please help us," Sarah pleaded desperately. "They're even attacking my mother's stall, the place she's dedicated her life to. If this continues, we really don't know what to do." Madam Lee paused for a moment before speaking. "Miss Lim, I'll introduce you to someone. He's a friend, very adept at handling these kinds of dirty PR battles. I've even sought his help before. It might be a bit costly, though. Is that okay? It's fine. I don't care how much it costs." The next day, Sarah met the person Madam Lee had recommended. He was a former journalist turned investigative consultant named Mark. Dressed in a worn jacket, his eyes, however, gleamed with an extraordinary sharpness. "I've heard the story," Mark said, scanning the documents Sarah handed him. "Mrs. Tan. I know her well from way back. On the surface, she plays the philanthropist, but behind the scenes, she ruthlessly crushes anyone who gets in her business's way. It seems she's hired a professional outfit this time, too." "Can we win?" Sarah asked. Mark offered a cryptic smile. "A PR battle isn't fought with facts, Miss Lim. It's fought with frames. Right now, Mrs. Tan has framed you as a poor mother and daughter seeking upward mobility. We need to break that frame and impose a new one." Mark gave Sarah several instructions. First, secure the video footage Madam Lee had recorded at the family dinner. Second, collect as much evidence as possible of MDM Ong's charity work and testimonials from fellow hawkers. Third, for now not to respond to any media inquiries and maintain silence. Sarah began to follow Mark's instructions. Madam Lee readily handed over the video. The footage vividly captured Mrs. Tan grabbing Sarah's hair and verbally assaulting her madam, Ong bravely defending her daughter, and Madam Lee exposing Mrs. Tan's plan to misuse charity funds. Sarah also visited stallholders at the Hawker Center, gathering stories about her mother. The hawkers universally praised MDM. Ong's diligence and kind heart, recounting how she would give free laksa to those in need and always be the first to help out in the community. Sarah recorded and documented everything. A few days later, Mark contacted her. "We're ready. It's time for the counterattack." That evening, a video was uploaded to an influential local news commentary channel. Its title, "The Truth About the Laksa, Mother and Daughter, the Two Faces of a Tycoon and Her Wife." The video began by showcasing the malicious posts circulating online. Then, the shocking footage from the family dinner was revealed. Mrs. Tan's violent outburst and MDM, Ong's desperate cries were more powerful than any explanation. The video didn't stop there. It displayed certificates proving MDM, Ong's consistent support for underprivileged children over many years, followed by heartfelt interviews with hawker stall owners. MDM. Ong is an angel of our hawker center. To accuse her of such things, those people will face divine retribution. Madam Ong's image, diligently working at her stall, was juxtaposed with Mrs. Tan adorned in designer clothes spewing hypocrisy. The video subtly asked viewers who the truly cultured person was. Towards the end, Mark's investigative findings were added allegations that Mrs. Tan's company, Tan Fashion House, had previously exploited subcontractors and stolen technology, along with concrete evidence regarding her plan to misuse charity funds. The tables had completely turned. Within a day of its release, the video garnered millions of views, eliciting an explosive public reaction. public opinion shifted 180 degrees. Criticism rained down on Mrs. Tan, and Tan Fashion House's website crashed from the sheer volume of negative comments. Conversely, MDM Ong's Laksa stall began to see an influx of customers bringing encouraging messages and eager to support her business. Late into the night, Sarah helped her mother tidy the stall. The graffiti that had once branded MDM Ong a fraud was now covered with encouraging notes, "Keep going, boss, Sarah MDM." Ong called her daughter's name softly. "Thank you. And I'm sorry. Sorry that I'm so inadequate that you had to go through such a terrible ordeal." "No, Mum," Sarah said, taking her mother's hand. "You are the strongest, most wonderful person in the world. Now it's our turn to show them just how strong we are." Mother and daughter shared a faint smile. This was only the end of the first round. The battle initiated by an unseen hand had now turned its blade towards its orchestrator, and Sarah did not yet know that at the end of this fight, a deeper, darker truth she could not even imagine awaited her. Even after winning the public relations battle, Sarah's heart remained uneasy. While exposing Mrs. Tan's ugly true colors to the world had been satisfying, a lingering disquiet settled deep within her. The pathological hatred and contempt Mrs. Tan had shown towards her, and her mother felt like something that couldn't be explained solely by the fact that MDM Ong ran a Laksa stall. It felt like a grudge that had festered for a very long time, its roots incredibly deep. Then one night, while sorting through old photo albums, Sarah discovered a faded photograph. It was taken during a family trip from her childhood before her father's business went bankrupt. In the picture, a smiling father stood beside a shy young Sarah while a younger MDM Ong looked lovingly at her daughter. Sarah suddenly realized how little she knew about her father's death. Her mother had only ever explained that her father had expanded his business, too aggressively accumulated crippling debt, and suffered a heart attack from the shock. "Mum, what was Dad's company called by any chance late at night, MDM?" Ong, who was knitting in the living room, paused her needles, startled by Sarah's sudden question. "Why do you ask all of a sudden? No reason, just curious." "I feel like I don't know much about what kind of person Dad was or what he did." A momentary shadow crossed MDM Ong's face. She sighed and said, "It wasn't a glorious ending, was it? Your father ran a small textile factory. It was called Lim Textiles. He named it after you. He adored you so much." Lim Textiles. Sarah repeated the name in her mind. An inexplicable unease crept over her. She recalled the information Mark had sent her about Mrs. Tan's company a few days prior. Mrs. Tan's current business was Tan Fashion House, a clothing brand, but its predecessor was a textile company called Horizon Fashions. Could it be? The thought spiraled. The next day, Sarah took leave and headed to the National Library. She was going to search old newspaper articles. As she flipped through microfilms searching for keywords like Lim Textiles and Horizon Fashions, Sarah's hand stopped at a particular spot. It was a small article nestled in a corner of an old business newspaper. Promising local SME Lim Textiles declared bankrupt due to financial difficulties. Allegations of core technology leakage also raised. The article dispassionately reported Lim Textiles' bankruptcy, and then Sarah's eyes fixated on the last paragraph of the article. Meanwhile, Horizon Fashions, a nascent company in the same industry, has recently garnered significant attention by being the first to launch a new fabric material that Lim Textiles was reportedly developing. Chills ran down her spine. Her heart pounded frantically. This was no coincidence. Sarah's trembling hands frantically searched for related articles. And finally, she found the decisive clue, an interview article with the founder of Horizon Fashions. The article featured a bright, smiling photo of a young Mrs. Tan and her husband, Mr. Tan, David's father. Mrs. Tan's interview, quote, stabbed Sarah's eyes. "We were simply fortunate. Our senior, the owner of Lim Textiles, assisted us in many ways, and it's regrettable that his company faced such sudden difficulties. We believe it's our duty to honor his technology and expertise by creating even better products." It was sickening hypocrisy. Draped in words like assistance and duty, the subtext concealed the ugly truth of technology, theft, and betrayal. The Tan couple had stolen her father's technology and dreams, using them as stepping stones for their own success, and her father had died amidst that betrayal and despair. Sarah sank into a corner of the library, weeping silently. Now everything made sense. Why Mrs. Tan had hated her and her mother so intensely. It wasn't merely class disdain. It was born of fear and guilt towards the very existence that reminded them of their despicable past. How horrified Mrs. Tan must have been when the daughter of the victim they had trampled upon appeared before her as her son's fiancé. That's why she wanted to push them away, crush them, and erase their existence at any cost. Returning home, Sarah secluded herself in her room, dazed and lost. Her father's smiling face and Mrs. Tan's mocking smirk alternated in her mind, tormenting her. Should she tell her mother this terrible truth, it would rip open a lifelong wound. But at the same time, she couldn't bury it. This was no longer just revenge. It was a battle to restore her unfairly deceased father's honor and reclaim everything that had been taken from them. Just then, the door quietly opened, and MDM Ong entered. She sat beside Sarah without a word, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulder. "You found out, didn't you, MDM?" Ong's voice was calm but filled with deep sorrow. "Mum, you knew MDM." Ong quietly nodded. "Your father. He was as good as dead because of them. Betrayed by the business partners he trusted his whole life, losing everything, drinking through the nights, and eventually passing away just like that. I wanted you to live your life without knowing that pain. That's why I never said anything. But I never imagined that their son and you would become involved like this." MDM. Ong took out a faded notebook from her pocket. It was her father's belongings. Inside, meticulously recorded with dates, were records of meetings with the Tan couple, entries from his technology, development journal, and even the amounts of money he had lent them. On the last page, there was a weakly scrawled message. "Mrs. Tan, Mr. Tan, I was a fool to trust you. You stole my technology, my company, my entire life. If there is a heaven, there will be a day when my injustice is avenged." It was her father's desperate cry. Sarah clutched the notebook, sobbing uncontrollably. This was not just circumstantial evidence. It was clear proof of the Tan couple's crimes. Mum, Sarah said, wiping her tears and looking at her mother with a resolute expression. "Let's not hide anymore. Let's not run. We have to clear Dad's name. We're going to take back everything they stole from us." In her daughter's eyes, MDM. Ong saw the same fire in her own. The sadness and anger she had suppressed for decades began to surge like hot lava. The shadow of the past was no longer a chain binding them. It would now become their most potent weapon for retribution. The real war for the mother and daughter was about to begin. After learning the truth of the past, Sarah's relationship with David crossed an irreversible chasm. She no longer felt any pity or lingering affection for him. His sweet words and actions now seemed like vile deceit. His father was the enemy who had driven her own father to his death, and his mother was the demon who had built her wealth and reputation on that blood-stained money. David still persistently contacted Sarah. With public opinion now swayed by the YouTube video, he tried to play the victim, appealing to Sarah's sympathy. "Sarah, I'm struggling too. The internet is implicating me as an accomplice. I can't just quit my job. We shouldn't be like this. Let's meet and talk things through. I'll convince my parents to revert everything to square one." Sarah scoffed at his messages. Square one. What did he mean by square one? Did he mean forgetting everything and returning to being loving partners? Sarah sent a firm reply. "David Tan, please stop contacting me. You and I are nothing to each other anymore." And just one question, did you truly know nothing? Did you really not know what your parents did to my father? After receiving Sarah's message, David remained silent for a while. His silence was an answer in itself. He had known. All along, or at least partly, he had been aware that the foundation of his parents' wealth was built upon a dirty secret. Yet he had approached her, whispered words of love, and promised marriage. A few days later, Sarah encountered David at work. With a haggard face, he blocked her path. "Talk to me, Sarah, please. There's nothing to talk about." Sarah tried to walk past him. "The message you sent me, what did it mean? What did my father do to your father?" Sarah let out a bitter laugh at his shameless question. "Don't pretend you don't know. You knew, didn't you? You knew how your family accumulated their wealth. Are you going to say you've never heard the name Lim Textiles?" At the mention of Lim Textiles, David's face turned white. His pupils dilated violently. That reaction alone was enough. "How did you—" "Don't try to play innocent now. Heaven and earth know that your parents stole my father's technology and ruined his company to get where they are today. How could you possibly tell me you loved me? Didn't you feel any guilt?" David bit his lip and lowered his head. After a moment, he uttered unbelievable words. I knew. Sarah couldn't believe her ears. I had a vague idea ever since I was very young. It came up sometimes when my parents argued. But I just wanted to ignore it. I didn't want to admit that everything I enjoyed was built on someone else's tears. Sarah felt a surge of fury as if her blood was boiling. So why did you approach me? Why? At first, you were just a colleague, but the more I got to know you, the more I liked you. Truly. Then when I found out you were Mr. Lim's daughter, it felt like I'd been hit over the head. I thought it was fate. I thought if I married you, treated you well my whole life, and atoned to my mother, then my parents' sins would be somehow absolved. That was my way of atoning. Atonement? Sarah scoffed in disbelief. That's atonement, hiding the truth, deceiving us, trapping us within your family's walls, and living with a clear conscience for the rest of your life. That's not atonement, David. That's sheer selfishness and arrogance. You're just like your mother. No, you're even more cowardly and disgusting. Sarah no longer wished to speak to him. She turned away coldly. It was the moment David's mask completely shattered. He was not an innocent victim. He was an accomplice who knew of his parents' sins, stood by idly, and even tried to exploit that sin, framing it as his love. This completed the first twist. David was not a naive lover, but a deceiver who knew everything. That evening, Sarah handed over a copy of her father's notebook and all related documents to Mark. This isn't something that can just end with a PR battle, Mark said, examining the documents with a grave expression. Breach of fiduciary duty, technology theft. The statute of limitations might have passed for criminal charges, but we have a strong case for a civil lawsuit. More importantly, if this information goes public, the Tan couple will be completely ostracized socially. Mark moved meticulously. He began tracking down former employees of her father's company. Most were scattered and difficult to reach, but he managed to connect with a few. They vividly recalled the day they were unfairly forced to leave the company. In particular, Mr. Cheng, the former head of the technology development team, provided detailed testimony on how the Tan couple had gained her father's trust, accessed his technical data, and then betrayed him at the crucial moment. All evidence and testimonies were secured. All that remained was to reveal the truth to the world. However, Mrs. Tan's side did not remain idle. Sensing Sarah and Mark's movements, they hired a powerful law firm to prepare their legal defense. And once again, they resorted to their dirty tactics. One day, tax officers raided MDM. Ong's stall, claiming to be investigating tax evasion. Someone had clearly filed a malicious false report. MDM. Ong had diligently paid her taxes her entire life, but the sudden tax investigation alone dealt a heavy blow to her business. Customers began to avoid the stall, and negative rumors once again circulated in the hawker center. Just as I thought that family had something fishy going on, Mrs. Tan was now using the bigger weapons of law and power to pressure the mother and daughter. But Sarah no longer wavered. On the contrary, her enemy's desperate struggle only ignited her fighting spirit further. Mark, let's begin now. Sarah knew the day of reckoning had arrived. Her father's notebook, the testimonies of former employees, and the Tan couple's ugly past. It was time to expose all of it to the world. This was not just an exposé. It was the prologue to the final war to restore the honor of the unjustly fallen and bring those wearing masks of evil to justice. Mrs. Tan's pressure came from all directions. Following the tax investigation, the hygiene department conducted a surprise inspection, and the town council issued an eviction notice for MDM. Ong's stall citing issues with the outdoor seating. These were all cunning acts of harassment disguised as legal procedures. MDM. Ong's stall was effectively forced into temporary closure. Yet MDM. Ong endured silently. Knowing her daughter was preparing for a bigger battle, she reassured herself that these hardships were nothing. Meanwhile, Mark compiled all the evidence and submitted it to a prominent investigative journalism outlet. He carefully chose a media partner known for its significant reach and resilience against external pressure. The journalist who received the tip recognized the gravity of the situation and immediately launched an in-depth investigation. The reporter interviewed Sarah MDM, Ong and Mr. Cheng, the former employee of Lim Textiles, in succession. The camera zoomed in on her father's handwriting in the old notebook, and Mr. Cheng, his voice trembling, testified to the injustices of the past. My boss was too trusting. He especially cherished Mrs. Tan like a younger sister. He even entrusted her with the key to the safe containing core technology documents. Who would have thought she was colluding with our competitor? The reporter also visited the headquarters of Tan fashion house Mrs. Tan's company. Naturally, they were refused an interview and even pushed out by security guards. But their arrogant attitude backfired, only fueling public anger. As the broadcast date approached, Mrs. Tan's side desperately tried to stop it, filing an injunction, but the court dismissed it. The weight of truth was heavier than their money and power. Finally, on the day of the broadcast, Sarah and Madame Ong watched the TV together in their small stall. As their story unfolded on screen, Madame Ong quietly wiped away tears. The deep-seated resentment she had carried for decades felt at least partially assuaged. The impact of the broadcast was far beyond imagination. The Lim Textiles case instantly became the top trending search term on all local portals. Public outrage against the Tan couple surged. The public was shocked to learn that their success story was in fact built upon the tears and suffering of a small business owner. A boycott of Tan Fashion House spread like wildfire. Department stores rushed to withdraw Tan Fashion House displays, and their stock prices plummeted. In the social circles Mrs. Tan valued so highly, she instantly became persona non grata. No one wanted to shake her blood-stained hands. Mr. Tan's situation was no different. His company faced fierce protests from shareholders, and as corporate ethics issues flared, numerous major contracts were canceled. Everything they had painstakingly built over a lifetime was crumbling like a sandcastle. Only then, realizing the gravity of the situation, did the Tan couple try to contact Sarah. But Sarah refused to answer. What good would their apologies do now? They were people undeserving of forgiveness. A few days later, Sarah through Mark filed a civil lawsuit. It was a claim for damages due to the technology theft from Lim Textiles. Even if criminal charges were difficult due to the statute of limitations, her determination was to hold them accountable in civil court, seize their assets, and restore her father's honor. The legal battle was long and arduous. Mrs. Tan's side employed the nation's top law firm to somehow evade responsibility, but her father's notebook and Mr. Chang's testimony were irrefutable evidence. As the trial progressed, public opinion worsened, and the Tan couple, whenever they appeared in court, were surrounded by reporters and angry citizens pelted with eggs. During this process, David quit his job and vanished. He simply couldn't handle the situation. Sarah occasionally heard news of him but felt no emotion. He had already been completely erased from Sarah's life. One day, after leaving court, a frail man approached Sarah. He introduced himself as the owner of a subcontractor that used to supply Lim Textiles. "Miss Sarah Lim Wright, I saw you on TV and it gave me courage. And it's not just me. Many businesses face sequential bankruptcies because of Mr. Tan's family back then. We want to fight alongside you." Sarah's battle was no longer hers alone. Victims from the past began to gather one by one. They formed a joint lawsuit group, accusing the Tan couple of other criminal acts. The scale of the movement grew uncontrollably. The small stone Sarah had thrown had caused a massive avalanche. Sarah realized the terrifying weight of truth. It possessed the power to drag down those who had once been arrogant, believing they owned the world to the most wretched depths. And the process of uncovering that truth, though painful, ultimately saved and righted many more lives. The fight wasn't over yet, but Sarah was already certain of victory. As the lawsuit progressed, the Tan couple's empire began to shake from its foundations. In addition to the Lim Textiles case, past corruption surfaced one after another: tax evasion, embezzlement, unfair treatment of subcontractors, and more. Their ugly true colors hidden behind their success made headlines daily. Even their money and connections could no longer contain the deluge. Sarah went between the courthouse and her lawyer's office every day, continuing the fight. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was clearer than ever. Then one day she encountered an unexpected person at the lawyer's office. It was Madame Lee, who had exposed all the truth at the family dinner. "Miss Lim, you've been through a lot. Madame Lee, what brings you here?" Madame Lee smiled faintly, holding up a stack of documents. "I have a bit of a grudge against them too. My husband's company suffered significant losses because of Mrs. Tan's husband, Mr. Tan. Back then we had no evidence and just had to endure it. But thanks to you, Miss Lim, I've found the courage to fight back." Madame Lee's husband had once been a business partner of Mr. Tan, but Mr. Tan had subtly broken their contract and embezzled a huge investment. That incident had plunged Madame Lee's family into a major crisis. The Tan couple had been like parasites, enriching themselves by sacrificing those around them. Sarah and Madam Lee naturally joined forces. Madam Lee handed over all the accumulated evidence of Mr. Tan's corruption to Sarah's lawyers. Her influential network also proved to be a great asset. People who had turned their backs on the Tan couple began to help Sarah through Madam Lee. The most unexpected person among them was Miss Tan, Mr. Tan's younger sister, David's aunt. She had long been disgusted by her brother and sister-in-law's greed and hypocrisy and had cut ties with them. When the Lim Textiles case erupted, she decided she could no longer remain silent. Miss Tan contacted Sarah directly. "Sarah, I'm David's aunt. I am deeply ashamed of what my brother and sister-in-law did. I will testify to their crimes. I will expose how much pain they inflicted on so many people under the guise of family." On the day of the trial, Miss Tan took the witness stand and meticulously detailed how the Tan couple had stolen Lim Textiles technology, including specific conversations they had. She even revealed that when Sarah's father died, Mrs. Tan had callously remarked, "Now he can finally put his feet up." Her testimony shocked everyone in the courtroom. The testimony from their closest family member became a powerful dagger piercing the Tan couple's hearts more effectively than any other evidence. With the tide fully turned against them, the Tan couple launched their final, desperate struggle. They sent thugs to MDM. Ong stalled to intimidate her. They stalked Sarah late at night, trying to create an atmosphere of fear. But with the police and media already paying close attention to Sarah and her mother, their despicable tricks were immediately exposed, only adding to their list of charges. Now no one remained by their side. Relationships forged by money dissipated like an ebb tide, and even their only trusted son David had abandoned them. They were completely isolated. Finally, on the day of the final verdict, the court acknowledged the Tan couple's technology theft and liability for damages, ordering them to pay a substantial sum, including compensation for Lim Textiles' losses and moral damages. Moreover, they lost subsequent lawsuits, resulting in the seizure of most of their assets. In an instant, they lost everything and were saddled with crushing debt. Leaving the courthouse, Mrs. Tan's face was lifeless, a ghastly pale. Spotting Sarah, she lunged with venomous eyes, but was restrained by the court officers. "Sarah Lim, because of you. My life is ruined because of you. I won't let you get away with this." Ignoring her desperate struggle, Sarah quietly left the courtroom. Outside, numerous reporters and supporters awaited her. Sarah calmly stepped before the microphones. "Today's verdict is not just a victory for me and my family. This is a victory for all good people who have fought against the power of money and influence. It proves that the truth will always come to light." Thunderous applause erupted at Sarah's heartfelt speech. MDM. Ong, standing by her daughter's side, quietly wiped away tears. It was the moment a long and arduous battle finally came to an end. But Sarah knew that it wasn't entirely over yet. And at the culmination of this victory, she was destined to confront another truth she couldn't even imagine. The court battle was over, and the Tan couple had fallen from grace. Their assets were distributed as compensation to the victims, and even their luxurious mansion was foreclosed and auctioned. The media widely reported the story of Sarah and her mother, hailing it as a triumph of justice. MDM. Ong's Laksa stall became a national sensation with franchise offers pouring in, and the business thrived. Everything seemed to have found its rightful place. Sarah resigned from her corporate job. She no longer wished to work in a place that reminded her of her past entanglement with David. She began to plan a new life, helping her mother at the hawker stall. She even considered becoming a lawyer herself, a path to help those who had been wronged, much like her giving meaning to her father's death. One day when everything seemed peaceful, a registered letter arrived for Sarah. The sender was Mrs. Tan, incarcerated in Changi Prison. Sarah hesitated, wondering whether to open the letter. She knew it would likely contain curses and hateful words. But something compelled her, and Sarah opened the envelope. The letter's content was surprisingly different from her expectations. While there were indeed elements of resentment and bitterness, it was largely filled with agonizing remorse and self-reproach. And in the final part of the letter, a sentence made Sarah doubt her eyes. "I was not the only one who ruined my father. Ask your mother, MDM Ong. Who was the last person my father met that day? And who was the one who took the most important contract out of my father's safe?" Sarah's heart plummeted. It was an absurd claim. She tried to convince herself it was merely Mrs. Tan's final desperate attempt to sow discord and destabilize her. Yet, a creeping unease, a sense of dread began to take root in her mind. The one who took the most important contract out of my father's safe. The sentence lodged in her brain like a poison. That night, Sarah tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Mrs. Tan's letter replayed in her mind. Her mother couldn't have done it. MDM. Ong had dedicated her entire life to her father and her. But what if, just what if, there was something she didn't know? Sarah got out of bed and quietly walked to her mother's room. MDM. Ong was fast asleep. Sarah approached her mother's wardrobe and carefully opened the door. Tucked away in the deepest part of the wardrobe was a small wooden box Maudem Ong had cherished. Since childhood, Sarah had always been curious about its contents, but her mother had never opened it for her. Sarah's trembling hands opened the box. Inside, along with a few faded photographs, was a discolored envelope. Sarah carefully opened the envelope, and the moment she saw the document inside, she couldn't breathe. It was the title deed for the factory land of Lim Textiles, her father's company, and the owner's name on it was MDM Ong. The date was just a few days before her father's passing. Sarah felt her entire body turn cold. What was this? Her father had lost everything and the company had gone bankrupt. So how could the factory land still be in her mother's name? And why had her mother kept this a secret all these years? Her mind went blank. Mrs. Tan's letter began to fit together like puzzle pieces. Who was the last person my father met who took the most important contract from the safe? At that moment, MDM Ong, awakened by the noise, entered the room. Her face turned ashen when she saw the document in Sarah's hand. Sarah, that's... Sarah's voice trembled with coldness. What is all this? Explain it to me. What's going on, MDM? Ong's lips quivered and she sank to the floor. Tears streamed endlessly down her face. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry. Her mother's apology. It was the answer Sarah had least wanted to hear. Sarah let the document fall to the floor. She felt as if the entire world she had believed in was crumbling around her. A terrible suspicion enveloped her. She had thought she had defeated a great evil in Mrs. Tan, but perhaps the real enemy had been right beside her all along. This was the prelude to a double twist. The celebratory toast of victory was a poisoned chalice, and at the end of every truth, another lie lay in wait. Tell me, Mum, what is all of this? Sarah's voice trembled with a mix of anger and betrayal. MDM. Ong remained on the floor, unable to lift her head. The secret she had buried for decades had finally surfaced, and she had no excuses. When your father's business began to decline, it was already beyond saving. The fraud by the Tans was just the final blow. His investment debts were spiraling out of control. MDM, Ong's voice trembling, began to reveal the truth of that day. Her father was a proud man. He didn't want his wife and young daughter to see him as a failure. So he lied to MDM, Ong pretending everything was fine while secretly resorting to loan sharks and dangerously walking a tightrope. One day, the loan sharks even came to our home. That's when I knew. Everything was over. Your father had given up everything and was even contemplating extreme measures. I only thought of saving you, Sarah. MDM Ong had pleaded with her desperate husband. She implored him to at least save their last remaining asset, the factory land. She reasoned that if they divorced and transferred the title to her as part of a property settlement, they could at least avoid ending up on the streets. Her father, initially adamant in his refusal, finally conceded after seeing young Sarah's face. So, Mum, you were the one who took the documents from Dad's safe, MDM. Ong nodded, tears tracing paths down her wrinkled cheeks. Yes, it was me. I secretly made a stamp, forged a power of attorney, and transferred the deed. I was afraid your father might change his mind at the last minute. He was a man who wanted to protect his company until the very end. Sarah was struck as if by a hammer. Her mother had betrayed her father. Although it might have been a choice to protect their family, the act itself was a clear betrayal. Her father, in his final moments, might have felt abandoned even by the wife he trusted most. Mrs. Tan knew. What she wrote in the letter? She knew everything. I ran into her by chance in front of the court the day I transferred the deed. I can never forget her expression then. That sneering look as if she had everything and was mocking me. Mrs. Tan had dismissed MDM, Ong's actions as the cunning maneuver of a wife siphoning off her husband's assets. and she had used that fact to push her father further into the abyss of despair, planting discord by telling him even his wife had abandoned him, crushing his last shred of pride. So Dad died knowing Mum had transferred the deed. No, ma'am. Ong shook her head. Before he found out about that, he collapsed from the shock of hearing the Tans had stolen his technology and fled. Even in his last moments in the hospital, he kept saying he was fine, that with me and you, he could rise again. MDM. Ong's confession further complicated Sarah's feelings. Her mother had betrayed her father, yet at the same time she had tried to protect him until the end. Her actions had been an unavoidable choice to save her family, but she had lived a lifetime burdened by the guilt that this choice might have contributed to her father's death. And she had carried that secret, unable to share it, even with her daughter living her life silently, as if atoning, selling laksa. Sarah was confused. As much as she felt anger towards Mrs. Tan, a resentment towards her mother also welled up. Why hadn't she told her? Why had she carried this burden alone her entire life, even deceiving her own daughter? So what happened to the land? After your father died, the loan sharks swarmed, and I sold it for a pittance. After paying for your tuition and setting aside seed money for the laksa stall, there was nothing left. In the end, I couldn't protect anything. MDM. Ong's final words pierced Sarah's heart like a dagger. Her mother had tried to protect everything, but ultimately she had protected nothing. All that remained was a lifetime of guilt and a secret she couldn't share even with her daughter. Sarah left the room without a word. She couldn't forgive her mother, but at the same time, she couldn't hate her. The sheer weight of the life her mother had carried echoed deeply within her, bringing pain to her chest. For several days, a heavy silence hung between mother and daughter. Even as they worked together at the stall, they spoke little beyond what was necessary. Sarah had believed she had completed her revenge against Mrs. Tan, but now, knowing all the truth, she felt lost, unsure what she was fighting for. Her victory had lost its luster, leaving only emptiness. Her mother's secret. It was a wound of a different dimension than Mrs. Tan's malicious acts. Sarah realized that facing an internal wound was far more agonizing than battling an external enemy. How could she mend this deep wound? Sarah decided she needed to visit her father's grave. Perhaps there she might find an answer. Her father's grave was located in a quiet memorial park. Sarah, holding a bouquet of chrysanthemums, visited her father alone. Standing before the small tombstone engraved with the name Lim Hawk, soon suppressed emotions welled up. Dad, I'm here. Sarah caressed the tombstone, incoherently recounting all that had happened. Her revenge against the Tan couple and the discovery of her mother's secret. She spoke as if her father were alive, confessing everything. Dad, what should I do? Should I forgive Mum? Did Mum betray you, or was she trying to protect us? I'm so confused. Sarah wept for a long time before the silent tombstone. Then a soft voice came from behind her. Your father was a good man. Sarah gasped and turned to see Mr. Cheng, her father's former technology team leader, standing there. He was the kind man who had testified for her in court. Miss Cheng, how? I visit sometimes. Even if not for the boss's anniversary, when my heart feels heavy, coming here helps. Today, I had a feeling you might be here. Mr. Cheng stood beside Sarah, looking at the tombstone. He spoke softly as if to himself, yet loud enough for Sarah to hear. People wouldn't know how much the boss struggled at the end. I saw him every night drinking alone in the factory, weeping. If it weren't for your mother, he would have likely broken down much earlier. Sarah listened intently to the unexpected revelation. Your mother, she may have looked fragile on the outside, but she had a will of steel. Even when the loan sharks stormed the factory, causing trouble, she stood in front of your father, shouting for them not to lay a hand on her husband. Such a woman betraying your father, I don't believe it. Mr. Cheng paused and looked at Sarah. Of course, I don't know all the details. No one truly knows what goes on between a husband and wife, but one thing I do know is that until his very last breath, your father worried only about your mother and you. Those two, they loved each other terribly. Mr. Cheng's calm comfort slowly began to thaw Sarah's hardened heart. She started to think that her parents' relationship, seen through a third party's eyes, might be different from what she had imagined. Her mother's actions might not have been the best, but they might have been an unavoidable choice to prevent the worst. On the way down from the memorial park, Sarah pondered many things. What was forgiveness? Was it completely forgetting the other person's wrongdoing, or was it understanding their pain and why they acted as they did? When she returned home, MDM, Ong was silently waiting for her, having already set the dinner table. On the table was Sarah's favorite steamed egg custard from childhood. "Sit down. Time to eat." In the awkward silence, dinner began. Sarah took a spoonful of rice, then quietly broke the silence. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? How hard was it for you alone?" At her daughter's question, filled not with blame but concern, Ong's eyes welled up. "I couldn't tell you. I felt like I was betraying your father, and I was afraid you would resent me." "I did resent you," Sarah said honestly. "Even now, I don't fully understand everything. But I think I can finally grasp a little of how much you must have suffered." Sarah rose from her seat and sat not across from her mother, but right beside her. She gently took her mother's calloused hand. "Let's go to Dad together. We'll tell him everything, ask for his forgiveness, and then, Mum, please forgive yourself." At that moment, Ong began to weep like a child. The guilt and sorrow that had weighed her down for decades poured out with her tears. Sarah silently held her mother. It might not be perfect forgiveness. The wounds would likely still remain. But mother and daughter were now ready to embrace each other's pain and move forward together. The revenge against Mrs. Tan was over, but Sarah's true growth was just beginning. She was slowly realizing that the world couldn't be divided into just good and evil, black and white. That even the people you loved most could have unspoken secrets and hidden pains. And that true forgiveness wasn't erasing the past, but embracing its wounds and walking towards the future together. Mrs. Tan, having lost everything, was spending her days in despair in solitary confinement. Her glamorous past had vanished like a dream, leaving only social condemnation and a harsh reality. Her husband, Mr. Tan, was incarcerated in another prison, and her son, David, was nowhere to be found. She was completely alone. At first, she spent sleepless nights consumed by hatred for Sarah and Ong, but as time passed, the hatred transformed into self-loathing. What had made her such a monster? She recalled her impoverished childhood, the painful memories of being harshly dismissed, and her twisted obsession with success. She had stopped at nothing to climb higher, ignoring the suffering of others in the process. In the end, all that karma had come back to haunt her. Then one day, Mrs. Tan received news of a visitor. To her surprise, it was her son, David. After months apart, David looked like a completely different person. Instead of expensive clothes, he wore worn work overalls, and his face was tanned and rough from the Sunday David. David looked at his mother with a heavy heart. "How's your health, Mother? What are you doing here? Did you come to show me this state?" Mrs. Tan's voice was still sharp. "I have something to say to you, Mother." David paused, then spoke with difficulty. "I'm working at a construction site. I'm finally beginning to understand what it means to earn money through honest labor, and I want to ask for Sarah's forgiveness." "Forgiveness? Are you going to beg that hawker girl never?" Mother David's voice was firm. "Think about what we did. Sarah's father died, and Sarah and her mother lived a lifetime of suffering. We didn't just steal money, we stole a family's happiness and their lives. I can't sleep at night like this, Mother." David handed her an envelope containing the money he had earned. "This is the money I earned. It's not much, but I've sent it to Ong's stall as compensation. I plan to work like this my whole life, slowly repaying what we owe. You too, Mother, must let go of everything and sincerely apologize. That is the only way for us to live." Mrs. Tan was deeply shocked by her son's transformation. This was not the weak, pampered boy she had known. He was trying to stand on his own 2 feet. She felt a tiny spark of hope flicker in the ruins of her life. Meanwhile, Sarah and Ong were slowly returning to their daily routine. After visiting her father's grave together, confessing everything, and seeking forgiveness, much of the emotional burden between mother and daughter had lifted. Ong was no longer bound by past guilt and began to focus on the present. Then one day, a small package arrived at the stall. Inside was cash and a short letter. It was from David Tan. He dispassionately expressed his profound regret for his wrongdoing and his intention to atone for it over his lifetime. Sarah read the letter filled with complex emotions. Her hatred for him had long dissipated. Now he was simply a human being who had recognized his mistakes and was trying to live a new life. Sarah intended to return the money, but Madame Ong stopped her. "Let's keep it. That boy in his own way wants to atone." We don't need to reject that sincere intention. Sarah nodded at her mother's words, realizing that forgiveness was necessary not only for the other person, but also for oneself. Time passed, and Mrs. Tan, due to exemplary conduct, was released from prison. On the day of her release, David was waiting outside the prison gates, driving a worn-out truck. Mrs. Tan's eyes welled up at the sight of her son, who had grown so much. "Where are you going now? There's a place we can go together, Mother." David drove to a small rural village. There he had a small vegetable patch and a humble house he had bought with his earnings. "Live here with me, Mother. We can farm and start over, just us." Mrs. Tan silently looked at the earthy vegetable patch. Compared to her glamorous past, it was incredibly humble, yet strangely she felt a sense of peace. Only after losing everything did she finally realize what true value meant. From that day on, Mrs. Tan and David lived quietly in the countryside farming. For the first time in her life, Mrs. Tan touched the soil and sweated through labor, learning the sanctity of honest work. And sometimes she would quietly shed tears of remorse, recalling the lives of Sarah and MDM Ong, which she had so terribly damaged. Her atonement was just beginning. Sarah decided to enroll in law school. The past year of struggle had taught her many things: that the law could be a shield for the weak, but sometimes also a weapon for the powerful. She now wanted to learn the law thoroughly and dedicate her life to helping people like herself. MDM Ong fully supported her daughter's decision. "Your father in heaven will be proud too. My daughter, do everything you want to do. Mom will keep selling laksa to support you all the way." MDM Ong's laksa stall became even more famous, known as Laksa of Honesty and Hope. Customers from all over the country flocked to the stall daily. MDM Ong donated a significant portion of her increased income back to society. She established a foundation to help single mothers in difficult circumstances like she once was, and expanded her support for underprivileged children. Her philanthropy was no longer hidden, but she continued to give back quietly and diligently. Sarah, helping at her mother's stall during the day and studying at the library at night, diligently prepared for her future. It was a challenging time, but her face radiated vitality. A life with purpose made her stronger and brighter. Then one day, a welcome visitor came to the stall. It was Madam Lee, who had helped them at the very beginning of their struggle. "Miss Lim, you look well. Madam Lee, please come in." Madam Lee happily ate the laksa Sarah offered, smiling warmly. "I came to recommend someone. Our foundation is looking for a legal advisor, and I was hoping you'd consider it when you become a lawyer." "Me, but I'm not even a student yet. I'm putting in my claim early, you see. We desperately need someone with your conviction and strength, Miss Lim. Take your time to think about it." Madam Lee's offer greatly motivated Sarah. She studied even harder and finally was accepted into a prestigious law school with excellent grades. On the day of the matriculation ceremony, MDM Ong, dressed beautifully in a traditional kabaya, attended her daughter's ceremony. Watching her shining daughter on stage, MDM Ong quietly wiped away tears. The painful past flashed before her eyes. But it was because of all those trials that her daughter stood there strong and resolute. Sarah's new life had begun. At university, she learned not only legal knowledge but also how to understand the world more deeply. And 3 years later, she finally passed the bar exam, becoming a distinguished legal professional. On the day she received her first salary, Sarah took her mother to a fancy restaurant. "Mom, dinner's on me today. Order the most expensive thing you want, MDM." Ong smiled brightly, accepting the glass of wine her daughter poured. "My daughter's all grown up. You'll do well even without your mom now." "What nonsense are you talking about? From now on, I'm going to make sure you live a life of luxury, Mum, for the rest of your life." Mother and daughter looked at each other, laughing happily. They were two people who had emerged from a long tunnel and finally stood bathed in warm sunlight. Their wounds might not have fully healed, but those wounds were now not scars but badges of honor that had made them stronger people. Sarah, as promised, joined Madam Lee's foundation and began working as a lawyer for the underprivileged. And on her desk, there was always her father's faded photograph. The thought that her father was watching over her served as a firm pillar, keeping her steadfast against any temptation or hardship. A new beginning. It was not a complete break from the past, but a courageous step forward, embracing the past and striving towards a better future. Life as a lawyer was busy and rewarding. Sarah primarily defended victims of domestic violence or workers subjected to unfair dismissal, people who often lacked legal protection. These weren't cases with high success rates or lucrative fees, but every time she wiped away the tears of an unjustly treated person, she felt truly alive. One weekend, Sarah drove her mother to a church out of town. As they drove along a quiet rural road, they chanced upon a small farmer's market, MDM. Ong suggested they stop to buy some fresh vegetables, and Sarah pulled over. The market was humble but bustling with life. As Sarah and her mother browsed, they spotted a mother and son selling homegrown vegetables in a corner. Sun-tanned faces, rough hands. Their appearance was vaguely familiar. As they drew closer, Sarah's breath hitched. It was Mrs. Tan and David. After several years, they looked completely different from their past glamorous selves, now appearing as ordinary rural farmers. Mrs. Tan's hair had grayed and deep wrinkles were etched on her face, but the once sharp, venomous glint in her eyes was gone, replaced by a resigned, peaceful look. David recognized Sarah first. He almost jumped up in surprise, but then quickly lowered his head, avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Tan, too, visibly flinched when her eyes met Sarah's. An awkward silence hung in the air. MDM Ong also recognized them and stood with a hardened expression. 1,000 emotions flooded Sarah's mind. What should she say in this situation? Should she pretend not to know them, or should she bring up the past? Then, Mrs. Tan, gathering her courage, approached Sarah and MDM Ong. She bowed deeply. "It's been a long time. Do you recognize me?" Her voice was small and trembling. Sarah could not speak. "I'm truly sorry for everything I've done. I committed an unforgivable sin," Mrs. Tan sobbed, unable to lift her head. "I know no words can earn your forgiveness. I just wanted to apologize even like this." Her apology felt sincere. It wasn't a calculated act or a performance to elicit sympathy. It was a genuine confession that could only come from someone who had spent a long time in self-reflection and bitter remorse. MDM. Ong looked at Mrs. Tan with a complex expression, then picked up a bag of lettuce she was selling. She took money from her wallet and handed it to David. "The lettuce is very fresh. Thank you, I'll enjoy it." It was the best answer MDM Ong could give. It was neither an act of forgiveness nor hatred. It was a silent message that she acknowledged their current lives and would no longer be bound by the past. Sarah, too, quietly nodded once, then followed her mother away. From behind them, David's soft voice reached them. "Thank you. And be happy." As the car drove away from the market, Sarah watched the two figures in the rearview mirror growing smaller and smaller. They were no longer the demons of the past. They were ordinary people paying for their sins, working hard and living new lives. "Mum, are you okay?" "Of course. All that is in the past now, MDM." Ong said calmly, looking out the window. "They have to live their lives now, and so do we." Sarah quietly smiled at her mother's words. It was the moment she realized that true revenge wasn't about destroying her adversaries, but about becoming happier herself. Even though she had accidentally encountered her past enemies, their presence no longer disturbed Sarah's peace of mind. She had already moved beyond the past and stood firmly in the present. No hardship could ever break her again. Sarah's lawyer's office was not large, but it was always bustling with people. Instead of speaking to clients with rigid legal jargon, she genuinely listened to their stories. Just as Mambong put her heart into making laksa, Sarah dedicated herself to alleviating people's suffering. Her sincerity resonated, and lawyer Sarah Lim became a symbol of hope among the vulnerable. One day, a group of students visited MDM Ong's stall. They wanted to interview her for a school project about proud figures in our community. MDM Ong waved her hands, insisting she wasn't deserving, but eventually agreed to sit down due to the students' persistence. "Grandma, what's the most important thing you consider when making laksa, MDM?" Ong pondered for a moment, then answered with a warm smile. "Honesty and sincerity. Food sustains people, doesn't it? Even a small bowl of laksa tastes truly delicious only when the maker's heart is in it. And that heart must be honest." After the interview, a student timidly asked Grandma, "Why is your stall called Fiery Laksa?" "It sounds a bit scary." The stall didn't have a formal signboard. But after the Lim Textiles case broke, a media outlet had described MDM Ong's life as laksa made with tears of blood, and people began to call it Fiery Laksa. Sarah didn't like the nickname. It reminded her of a painful past. But Madam Ong saw it differently. "Fiery," Madam Ong looked at the steaming red laksa in the pot. "That's not wrong. My youth, my father's struggle, and my Sarah's tears are all melted into it. But children, MDM. Ong looked at the students. Continuing blood and tears may mean pain, but they also mean life. This laksa saved me, it saved my daughter, and now it fills your hungry stomachs. So now it's not the color of pain, but the color of vibrant life. Hearing those words, Sarah's heart swelled. Her mother no longer remembered the past's wounds as just pain. She had embraced them as part of her life, giving them new meaning and living on. Fiery laksa. It was no longer a symbol of tragedy. It was a symbol of resilient vitality and warm love that had overcome adversity. That evening, Sarah made laksa with her mother. "Mum, I think I need to properly learn how to make laksa too. Maybe I'll quit being a lawyer someday and run the stall with you. Don't talk nonsense. You have bigger things to do." But this is a big thing that saves the world, isn't it? Feeding hungry people and comforting those with aching hearts. It's what you've done your whole life. Mother and daughter looked at each other and laughed brightly. The savory and spicy aroma spread beyond the stall. The scent captured passers-by, warmly comforting their hungry stomachs and weary hearts. MDM. Ong and Sarah's fiery laksa was thus reborn as the warmest and most hopeful food in the world. A few more years passed. Sarah was awarded a prestigious legal award for her contributions to legal aid for the socially vulnerable. At the awards ceremony, Sarah spoke about her mother in her acceptance speech. "I dedicate this honor to my mother, MDM Ong. My mother sells laksa in a hawker center, but to me, she is a teacher who taught me justice and love far greater than any law book. My mother showed me through her own life the honesty of hard work, the joy of giving, and the courage to never give up in the face of adversity. That I stand here today is all thanks to my mother's fiery laksa." Sarah's heartfelt speech drew a warm round of applause from the audience. In a corner of the audience, MDM Ong, watching her daughter, quietly wiped away tears. After the ceremony, mother and daughter held their own celebration. The venue wasn't a fancy restaurant, but their small laksa stall where their lives were interwoven. "Mom, I've found someone I want to marry," Sarah announced, blushing shyly. Her fiancé was Alex, a fellow lawyer she had met while working in a civic group. He didn't come from a prominent background, but he was kind-hearted and principled. MDM. Ong looked surprised, then beamed with joy. "My daughter is finally getting married. What kind of person is he?" "He's someone who loves your laksa the most, Mum." A few days later, Sarah's fiancé visited MDM Ong's stall to formally introduce himself. Though awkward, he earnestly helped with the dishes and clumsily served the laksa, trying his best to win MDM Ong's approval. MDM Ong watched his unpretentious efforts with a pleased smile. Sarah's wedding was small and intimate. The wedding venue was filled with neighbors and hawkers who had received help from Sarah and MDM Ong, as well as her fellow lawyers. Everyone sincerely blessed the couple's future. After the ceremony, Sarah, in her white wedding dress, approached her mother and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Mum, and I love you. I love you too, my daughter." MDM Ong tightly clasped her daughter's hand. In the warmth of that touch, mother and daughter wordlessly understood and comforted each other. Their lives continued. MDM Ong still made laksa in the hawker center, and Sarah with her husband became a beacon of light in the world's dark corners. Mrs. Tan and David lived quietly in the countryside occasionally, donating farm produce anonymously to Sarah's foundation. The world still had many injustices in life, sometimes brought harsh trials, but Sarah and Ms. Ong were no longer afraid. They knew they had each other, and they believed that any hardship would ultimately make them stronger and warmer people. On a bright afternoon, a long queue still formed outside MDM Ong's stall. Inside, Sarah, wearing an apron, was helping her mother. Like the steaming aroma of the laksa, their lives were warm and filled with hope. The story of revenge, of dismantling evil and reclaiming everything had ended, but the real story was just beginning. A life of cherishing simple, everyday moments with loved ones embracing each other's wounds and spreading warmth to the world. That was the most perfect happy ending they had found.